This is the Thrustmaster eSwap Pro controller for the Sony PS4. And just like the name suggests, it has swappable parts. Controllers can make or break the gaming experience. Anyone who's ever played on one of these Coleco calculators can tell you that much. When you think of third-party controllers, you usually think of companies like Mad Cat. Nowadays, companies usually license third-party companies to make controllers, like PowerA. Almost every Nintendo Switch controller besides the Joy-Con and the original Pro controller is PowerA. But those controllers are usually at the same level of quality, if not a little bit cheaper than the first-party controllers. There is a niche out there for third-party controllers that are much fancier than the originals. Some of these have different gimmicks, and this is definitely the most interesting of all of those I've ever seen. As far as I'm concerned, this is one of the first real modular controllers I've ever seen. Unless you count like VMUs with the Dreamcast controller, which I guess, yeah, would be a module. So you get this really neat presentation here, and right out of the box, you can tell this controller's got heft. I'd actually argue it might be heavier than a standard PS4 controller. It definitely has quite a bit more bulk and has more of the profile of an Xbox controller. Now, they released these Thrustmaster controllers for multiple consoles, and for the most part, their standard design is very similar. But the PS4 has the exclusion of this touchpad here. You have to excuse the little blemish here. We got this used through our storefront. And really, first impressions, I don't like the way this thing looks. It looks weird, chunky, and the way I have to hold it, my thumbs feel like they're at weird spots. I actually don't mind the standard PS4 controller and where it has you put your thumbs, but this feels like there's significant more stretching going on here. And perhaps the most striking thing I noticed when I first started handling this controller was the sound the buttons make. You hear that? They sound like keyboard switches. Now, it feels really good. It's just weird. It does not at all feel like a controller, and it's pretty loud. And what's even louder are the shoulder buttons. The loudness of the buttons doesn't really bother me, it's just an interesting thing to point out. You've got all your triggers and bumpers, your options, your share, your touchpad, PlayStation button, and all your analog sticks that press in, your D-pads, and your standard face button. But you also have these 4 numbered auxiliary buttons on the back that you can get with your ring finger and middle finger. In theory, they're kind of at a weird spot that you gotta weirdly do a claw thing here, and it isn't comfortable. Using this controller, I found using just my middle fingers is the best, and sort of moving them back and forth between those 2 buttons on each side. It isn't quite as seamless and convenient as, say, the paddles on the Xbox One Elite controller or the Steam controller. But they are a bit more out of your way, and you're not going to hit them accidentally. And they're really just add-ons. If you don't really use those buttons, it doesn't really affect you. At the bottom here, you have your standard headphone jack, as well as a mic button to mute your microphone, and a little social button there. So yeah, everything so far is pretty much just a controller. But you can take the parts off. So the whole gimmick of this controller is that you can take off the analog sticks, the D-pad, these little cushions here, and the triggers, and swap them for completely different ones that suit your personal tastes. It comes with this little screwdriver and T-bar tool, so you can stick that little T-bar into the D-pad and pull that out easily. And for the main triggers on the back, you do have to unscrew and screw them back in if you want to swap those out. So say you've been an Xbox gamer your entire life and are used to a 360 Xbox One controller, but you got a PS4 for Marvel Spider-Man. Hit a little too close to home. That DualShock analog stick layout just isn't for you. Well, they got you covered. You can switch it around to feel more like an Xbox controller, so you feel a bit more comfortable and at home playing on your new console. Or if you're a lunatic, you can use 3 analog sticks. That is only for the most hardcore of gamers. Now, this controller does not come standard with extra analog sticks, D-pads, triggers, or anything. Those are all sold separately in different module bundles. We've got one here, the silver color pack. This one comes with 2 silver analog sticks, some elongated triggers, a silver D-pad, swappable thumbsticks if you prefer a convex to a concave feel, and replacements for the arms. Now, all of these have very strong magnets in them. The connect in really solid, and they're not going to fall out. But they do have exposed contacts, so I would suggest cleaning this regularly because they do have exposed contacts both inside and on the modules. With the amount of used controllers we see come through the store at Nostalgic Video Games, you do not want gamer cheese in this thing, especially considering its price. Speaking of, how much is this thing? I forgot. $159.99. It's like 80, 90 bucks more than a brand new OEM controller. Now, is the gimmick of swapping parts around worth that steep price increase for you? All up to personal preference, I suppose. For me, no. I like to experience games on consoles with the controller that they were originally intended to be played with. That's why I like companies like Hypercan or Old School that keep the feel and spirit of that original controller. Button layout's a really important part of game development. If you have a GameCube controller for your Switch and you try to play other games besides Smash with it, you know exactly what I'm talking about. But that doesn't take away from the fact that this is a really, really solid controller. Now, Thrustmaster to me has always been associated with racing wheels, and that is primarily one of the big things that this controller was designed for. Racing games. You can customize your layout depending on which game you're playing, and if you want a little more grip, you can swap them out for these longer triggers. Not lose the screw because it's very small. It's really nice that they include the screwdriver, but I really wish it was magnetic because these tiny little screws are really hard to get in there. Yeah, check that out. That is a wonky looking trigger. But it gives you a little more leverage, a little more travel on it if you want a really fine-tuned control for your acceleration or brake if you're playing a racing game. But you have to keep in mind that if you get this with the intention of really customizing it, on top of that $160 price tag just for the base model, you have to pay more for each module pack. Now, there are tons of different ones out there with different colors, different D-pad shapes, convex or concave control sticks. You can really personalize this controller, but it's going to cost you quite a bit of money. Now, personally, I prefer these convex thumbsticks as opposed to these concave ones that have a little dish in them. And the base model only comes with the concave ones. You have to buy an expansion pack if you would like those convex ones. This model specifically can only be used wired. It comes with this absolutely massive micro USB cable, which is actually pretty dang nice. It's keyed to the controller specifically and has this big old brick on it so that it fits in there nice and snug, and the micro USB cable doesn't wiggle around and wear out. The included cable is plenty long enough, and for the most part I don't mind playing with a wired controller, but when you're paying $160 for it, I would expect it to be wireless. For as cool a concept as this thing is, it's executed really well. Price tag just yeesh. For $160, I would want a bunch more modules to come with this thing. Pretty much everything that came in this expansion. I feel like all of that should come in that base model. The asking price for me is just way too high, but I'm perfectly fine with just using my original controller. I also have a whole lot of other hobbies that I like to pour my money into. So dropping all that dough on one controller just isn't on the table for me. If I could pick this thing up used through a local game store, maybe I'd give it a shot. I also know that driving sim players spend a lot of money on their setups, and this controller would be a fantastic addition to that. But playing with this thing to me felt a lot like playing with an Xbox One Elite controller, but a bit pudgier. Xbox controllers to me feel a little small, so this had a bit more meat to it. And the buttons, of course, felt very weird. But the response and play with this thing is really nice. If you have one of these, comment down below and let me know what you think of it. I would love to know what other people think of this controller, just because it's something I didn't even know existed until it walked through the door at our store. That's the thing about working at nostalgic video games. You never know what is going to come through that door. So if you enjoyed, make sure to like and hit the bell icon so you don't miss the next video, and subscribe if you aren't already. We've got tons of awesome content on Nostalgic Network, and also check us out on Instagram and TikTok. We're active on there all the time. And if you like the shorts we post, they almost always go up on TikTok first. Down in the description, we also have a link to our Redbubble store, which is the best and only way to support this channel directly. So check out the shirts, stickers, and prints that you can get down there. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.